Dr. Lewis Baldwin. The topic is Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. Baldwin, before we end this show for today, I think it would be impossible to talk about anything without talking about the recent hearings in Memphis dealing with Dr. King's assassination. Let's use the last 5.5 minutes that we have here to give you an opportunity to talk from the point of view of your scholarship about Dr. King's assassination, and perhaps during the last part to say something about the recent hearings. But let's talk about his assassination.
Yes. Since the assassination in 1968, there have been a lot of nagging, painful questions about who was involved. Some have raised questions about whether or not the lone assassin's theory should be acceptable. Others have argued no, that we should think in terms of the conspiracy theory. There's been a lot of talk about that. We know that in the mid-1970s, a Gallup poll was taken, and the poll indicated that less than 1 in every 5 Americans thought of the assassination as a tragedy that was caused by one person. In fact, to put it another way, most Americans believed in the conspiracy theory, that Dr. King's death was the product of a conspiracy that might have involved some governmental forces. So since that time, we've had a lot of talk about exactly what happened, questions about exactly what happened. And finally, we're getting some publicity about that. From the very beginning, in the late 60s, early 70s, the King family, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s family, did not get involved. After James Earl Ray admitted that he had acted alone in the assassination, after he had confessed, well, I think the nation sort of settled down, and many people said, well, the case is ended. But in recent weeks, the King family has sort of moved out of the silence and is beginning to appeal for a new trial for James Earl Ray. And this is what we are seeing now. We don't know where it will lead, but we are hopeful that a trial will occur, because he was, of course, as you know, sentenced to 99 years in prison without a trial after his confession.
And so he never really had a trial as such,
yes.
That is, to be judged by his peers. And
yes, yes.
Now, the King family, I mean, when you look at that whole effort to bring about a hearing, is there any indication that Mr. Ray has any additional information, a trial, is there that he has any additional information that he's not already delivered to us?
There's no indication at this point. I was reading a couple of articles this morning. I'm sure you read them, one by Frank Ritter and one by Carl Rowan, dealing with the hearings that were held on last Thursday. Frank Ritter, I think, is right in saying that we aren't really going to learn anything new, that we'll simply learn from James Earl Ray that he's innocent, and of course he will state that he's innocent, that we need to perhaps pursue a person by the name of Raoul. We need to perhaps pursue the possibility of a conspiracy in the death of Dr. King. So I don't think we will learn anything new, but I do think that we should promote this idea of a trial for James Earl Ray, because he never had a trial. And I think a trial could exonerate him, could vindicate him. It could show that the death of Dr. King did result from a conspiracy. I think there are some things that we could perhaps learn, but I don't think we'll learn anything new, because I don't think James Earl Ray is prepared to share anything new.
Now, when you look at Dr. King, I think you've already indicated how the influence that he had in South Africa and the whole movement toward freedom in South Africa. When you look at Dr. King and his legacy, and you've written quite a bit about that, what can you tell our audience as departing statements in terms of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King?
Well, I think we need to understand that his legacy centered around this whole quest for what he called the beloved community, that meaning, of course, a completely integrated society, a completely integrated world in which one experiences intergroup, interpersonal living, mutual acceptance, sharing of power. I think that is central to his legacy. And even as we respect Dr. King's legacy, we must recognize that he was simply one figure in this total drama of the movement. And scholars are now beginning to move beyond a focus on major public figures like Dr. King and Malcolm X and others, to look at people like E.D. Nixon and Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks and Septima Clark and others. I think we need to respect his legacy, even as we understand the fact that he was part of a broader movement, you see. So I think the central part of his legacy involves this concept of community.
Very good. And Dr. Baldwin, let me thank you during these last 25 seconds that we have for coming by and giving us that excellent information about Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think, as we've already indicated, I don't think that we could have found a better guest to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King throughout this nation than Dr. Lewis Baldwin. And we're certainly delighted that you took the time to come by and give us that information today. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.